Welcome aboard. Here we are, just bobbing around on the mooring. I must confess, I've been a miserable bastard the past few days. I've not been sailing. I've just been out doing bits and pieces on the boat, you know. And as always, as soon as I start a job, it becomes a rabbit hole, and I end up just tearing bits out that I hadn't planned to tear out. And every job I take on seems to take on a life of its own. It's all got on top of me a little bit, really. I think I'm a bit maintenance weary, which is unfortunate because I own a boat with a wooden top and they are maintenance heavy. But anyway, I fitted this piece of bulkhead here, and you know, I don't know whether you remember or not, but that used to be just a hole straight through there because it used to be a pilot berth. So I've made this bit of bulkhead out of marine ply and edged it with some nice sapele there. I've also reworked the chart table because that was one of the little rabbit hole jobs that just popped up out of, you know, whatever. And what I've done is cut the chart table, and this bit is fixed now. It's just the where it's just big enough for the plotter and a few other bits and pieces. So that's fixed. I've also stripped it back and given it a coat of matte varnish. Matte varnish is my new, it's my new thing of, I worship it. It's so easy to get a good finish with it. And it suits obviously for a chart table. You don't want a reflective surface particularly there. It's not hinged yet, but basically I've cleaned out under there, made that little shelf, put that that half bulkhead in there, and because previously the hinges for the chart table were screwed to the top of the chart table, so we had like 2mm hinges sticking up here in 3 places. I've had to cut off the damaged bit of the chart table there and glue on this bit of Iroko beading. It's worked surprisingly well. It's going to be alright actually. I'm going to put a hinge on there, a nice piano hinge, brass one along there. That'll be it. I've also created this massive hole here, and that's where my switch panel, fuse box and all the new bits and pieces of electricity is going to go. Put LED bulbs in my nav lights and run new wire for all of the nav lights, and it's tinned annealed copper wire as opposed to household wiring, so it should last quite well, and it's massively overbuilt for the job that it's doing, for the current that it's carrying. So that's a good thing, isn't it? Of course none of it's wired up yet, but I have tested it at night and it works. So I need to do a switch panel and I need to finish wiring the boat, and for the wiring what I've got currently is all this really horrible household plastic conduit just nailed to the walls everywhere. Wires going all over the place. Look, another bit of plastic. Oh, there's the antenna wire. That's held up with this horrible plastic stuff, and that's everywhere on the boat, man, everywhere. I will be removing that and getting rid. And in fact, I'm going to make it so that none of the wires run along the coach roof here. For conduit, I'm going to use spiral wrap, and the reasoning behind that is with spiral wrap, if you want to add, and this is the problem with boat wiring, isn't it? When it's originally put in, they think that's it, job and done, and then a year later someone wants to add a charging socket. A couple of years after that somebody wants to add 2 more lights here and there, and so it goes on, and it grows legs, doesn't it? It becomes a spider, and then a spider with babies, and then the babies have babies, and before you know where you are, it's just an impenetrable mess. So the thing with spiral wrap is you can break into that circuit, that loom, at any point and add something if you want to without making a huge mess. It's also easy to get to things to do maintenance and stuff if you need to. I've got some stuff on order today. There's a website called 12 Volt Planet in the UK. Fantastic for getting stuff like that. And I remember rewiring, I used to fly gliders. I remember rewiring a glider I had using that stuff. It's really high quality gear and built a lot of stuff, so, and not super expensive. So that's where we get my supplies from. Today I'm going to start wiring the LED lights, internal lights. Anyway, enough talking, let's get cracking. Progress update then. So all this stuff needs refinishing, of course. That's the power supply for the plotter. That's obviously that light. Now I've taken all that plastic nonsense down from there. In fact, on both sides I've done that, so there's none there right now. This is a bit of speed fit pipe. It's wedged in there beautifully. I could screw it in there if I wanted to, but it's not going anywhere. And it's the only bit of conduit on the roof that you can see. I find it acceptable. That's what it is. It's just plumbing speed fit pipe. So now I've got these holes. Incidentally, were pre-existing. They were already in there on both sides. They were just been a little bit of filler over them. So I've just reanimated those. So power supply then for the plotter and the lights. I think what I'm going to do is wire this directly into this one. You know, in parallel, so not in series, and then just run this as the lead, and hopefully when I test it, they'll both work. Then after that, we'll see. Well, welcome aboard. Lovely day. A little bit too windy for sailing though. Just bumped into my mate Jeff on the quay. A keen watcher of these videos, and he said, "When's the next one coming out?" Well, I have been a bit slack because I've been working very hard on getting my wiring done. The wiring is almost done. Come and have a look at this. So, there's the refurbed chart table, and here's the new wiring panel with a nice hole for the radio. And for the VHF, I'm going to get a standard Horizon GX 220E where I can afford it, because it's got a built-in duplexer and an AIS receiver on it. Very, very good, excellent value for money. I think the best price I've found so far is like 300 quid. That's really good for the money, for what it is. So the new panel then is apparently waterproof. It comes with a 12-volt charging socket for like a car lighter, and those USBs, which is great for charging your phone, isn't it? And if I turn the batteries to battery 1, we get these little idiot lights. It shows the voltage. I've got music wired up now, so that works. Let's go back. Source, that's what I wanted. There we are.
For a lot of people, so good luck if that's you or somebody in your family. I bet they've been learning quotes.
Yeah, and these have these tiny little LED lights which draw nanofarts of electricity. Really, I'm not losing anything by having those. But when you switch one on, you get a bigger light there. So at the moment, I've got it rigged with nav lights, steaming light, plotter, auto tiller, and so on. And I think the interior lights are either this one or this one. I haven't got anything labelled yet, but that's already proving to be much more convenient than the last lot. So for my next trick, just turn those batteries back off. Don't need them yet. For my next trick, I'll install this Roquetta instrument box that I made in there. That'll mean, of course, that I'll need to cut a hole, and that's what's been holding me up to now, because just me and a tenon saw doing that's going to be a whole afternoon of just, oh god. I've got this. This is an Aldi rechargeable angle grinder. They do one of those multi-tool things, but I haven't got that. Anyone that's done anything on a boat knows the value of rechargeable stuff and portable tools. This is going to be amazing, I think. And it takes a 40-volt DC battery. This and 2 batteries and a charger, 100 quid. It's a bargain, really. We'll see how it holds up today. So that looks like it's right on the money to me. That little box, that's where it's going to go. So I'll be able to start the engine from outside the boat, from the cockpit, which that's a winner. Right, it's angle grinder o'clock then, isn't it? Put the battery in. See how we go. So far so good. pretty good. I'll have 3 more like that, please. Well, that battery shows no sign of weakening. I've done what I can from out here. I'm just going to go in there with my pen and saw now and see what I can get done. Oh no! There's another hole in the boat. Yeah, I mean, that battery powered angle grinder has done magnificently and has made short work of it, but it's, of course, it's not the right thing for the job. It's heated the wood up a bit, more than I would have liked, but nothing that won't come out in the wash, so to speak, so you never know. That part of it probably will. Okay, so once again I find myself mixing epoxy on the chart table. I'm not going to do it on the chart table. There's my hole. There's my box. That's where the stuff is at the moment, and all the switches and stuff that are in there now are now not used. It's all been transferred over, so it's just a horrible, nasty mess. That's the old fuse boxes in there. So imagine changing a fuse at sea. You've got to take 4 screws out of this, lift it off. Then you've got to undo those and take those covers off. And then you've got to figure out which fuse is blown, change that. I see a blown one there already. And so it goes on. My goodness, what a nightmare. You can see that the wiring for the engine is something quite distinct from everything else, so it should be quite easy to just transfer over. That'd be nice. It'd be nice if something was just quite easy. Anyway, there it is. So I can see the 2 power lines for that. Well, I can follow them back and see them there. Should be easy. So now I'm going to mix up some epoxy, smear that all around my box here, and crab it into position. And to be honest, you know, it's not perfectly straight. The hole's fairly straight, but the box is a little bit not straight. It won't matter. Once I've hung a bit of hinged perspex over it, which is leftovers from the 4-hatch that I reworked. It's just the gift that keeps on giving that. Nobody will see it. I'll know it's there, but I can live with it. So I'm going to mix the epoxy now and goop it in. I'll have gloves on for that. I'll film it when it's done. All I'm going to do is season the edges of the wound here with some epoxy before I do the same thing with the box. And before I close that joint, I'll just leave it for a couple of minutes, because that's end grain, open grain wood down. If it's going to soak any in, which it will, I want it to do it while I can still top it up again if I need to. So, and I suspect anyway that with a joint like this, as it dries it'll draw, so I'm going to put plenty on there, because I can always, you know, within reason, I can always finish it later, as in fair it later. I would rather that than have a dry joint, particularly one that's going to house the engine controls and be exposed a little bit to the elements. So plenty of that. Very good chance that some of that will spooge out into the cockpit, but once I feel I've got enough on there, I'll just go outside perhaps and do a bit of preemptive scraping. Right then, let's make sure I get the box the right way up, because the lower edge of the box is beveled to make water run out. So if you look at it that way on, you should be able to see that that part of the box goes up a bit, and actually the bottom here is flat and then kicks in, so it can fit into a square hole, even though it's not quite square. So that's why. Thus. too bad at all. What I've smeared epoxy onto and what I haven't. Oh god, so the wiring, that really got on top of me. Oh, every job I had to do there was crawling into some inaccessible space. You know, the autopilot's routed right under the aft deck there, and everything was like that. It was just, it gave me a headache. I've got to say, it gave me a headache. I don't like to admit it, but it's true. Not the wiring part. The wiring part was a doddle. It's just 12-volt electronics, you know. A bit of a ham radio person. And, I mean, I'm only an intermediate ham radio person, but even at intermediate, if you can't understand basic 12-volt electronics, you won't pass the exam. And it isn't really much more complicated than that. Just series and parallel wiring, and making sure everything that needs to be fused is fused. And I have to say that the whole switched and fused thing, I do feel that people go a bit overboard with it, their boats. I take a little bit of issue with having a separate switch for the VHF circuit, because the VHF has got a switch on it, and if there was a bloody landlubber on the boat and they needed to make a distress call and for some reason the radio wasn't on, they wouldn't have the wherewithal to find, you know, let's say worst case scenario, you know, the batteries are off as well. You expect someone that knows nothing to find the battery switch, switch the batteries on, find the switch on the panel for the VHF, switch that on, and then switch the VHF itself on. There's just no need for that. So fuse, yes, switch. I'm just going to use the remainder of the epoxy to build up a fillet on the outside of the box. And then today's mission is accomplished, and I can have a cup of tea, sit on the foredeck in the howling wind but the beautiful sunshine, and enjoy my boat. And actually, I mean, I get almost as much enjoyment out of sitting there, just making the most of it really, as I do from sailing. No, that's not true. No, I really do like going sailing. That is about it for me this time, I think. Next time on SV Roquetta, I'll be doing my day skipper practical with Cornish cruising in Falmouth. I think that's the end of, when is that? That's the end of June. That's the end of June. I may get another video in before then, but that's part of the plan anyway. We're going to be doing that. So you'll be brought up, good. In the meantime, it's a cup of tea, chill out, and watch my epoxy dry for me. Later.